how do you ensure that you get buy-in from all the staff? I mean, you might have that messaging of inclusiveness, but what do you do if staff don't want to pick up on that?
That's a bit of a tough one. Probably in 1999, when I first came to the school, there wouldn't have been buy-in from a lot of staff, and it's just been an incremental process over the years. We've had so many children on the PSD program that bit by bit because people are a bit scared, they wonder can they deal with a child with special needs, but once they've had them in their room or seen them in their classmate's room next door, they get to realise there's really no big deal. They are just like all of the other kids. We've got high needs kids. We've got kids in grade 6 doing year 9 maths. They are really difficult to work with. So, you work that way, you work the other way. It doesn't really matter. But once the staff have seen it in operation, that little bit of fear ebbs away.
Well, I think to add to that is adding in, or to remove some of that fear, is to add in some support. And sometimes that's education, sometimes that, PL, sometimes that's, talking to the teacher who was there previously, or putting a plan in place so it's not a scary option. And I think if you've, a whole school focus on just what's best for children, I think if you just continue that same message and be consistent about it, I think that takes away a lot of that. The culture is just, this is how it's done. So I think that makes a big difference, and certainly the support part makes a difference as well. I'll use Steph as a good example over there. Hi, Steph. I like to try and embarrass her. But, last year, Steph had Amani for the very first time, who I was talking about. And you can jump in any time you want. And had never taught a student with Down syndrome, correct? Yeah. And I guess, from looking at her face when she found out that she had Amani, was a bit anxious about it. But with connection, with support, with some PL, with making a few mistakes and stuffing a few things up and having our support to do that, just took it on and was fantastic. And has Amani again this year as part of a transition process, but most likely it won't next year, so no. But their relationship's so good that it's been a smooth transition, so that's probably how we dealt with that.
Thank you. Questions?
This is to Paul. It's the most difficult one in the room. Oh, sorry. A common question, and I'm sure people in this room would relate to it, that we have when we're out working in schools. We know the resourcing never matches, or sometimes doesn't match, what the school would really like to do and support students. But it is about safety and supervision, and we get this constantly where perhaps there's the student that tends to run and they necessarily haven't got the staff resources. This child needs 100% support. And so there's strategies they put in place, but bottom line is they need that student tracked all the time, and they haven't necessarily got the resourcing. Have either of you got any creative ways of I guess stretching resources further than they actually do go?
This is definitely an Ashley question.
Do we have any departmental officials in here? Because the resourcing is abysmal. It really is. I hope they do something about that. Yeah, we are creative. We have, luckily enough, the culture is that when we ask people to go out on penny duty and Rory duty, they do go out there, and we have teachers and aides go out there. My AP goes out. It's another thing I forgot to say before. We all, AP, principal, we all do yard duty. It's all for one for all at our school. We have the library open every single day, so there's a place that they can go as well, which is safe. We have a very high fence around the school with the buttons up the top, and I had to assist a young man who's about 25 to get into our school today, so it works. He couldn't work out those things, but it is that, look, we really just have to make ends meet. At the moment, we've got another parent who wants also supervision in the playground. At the moment, we just can't do it. So we've had to prioritise. Penny needs support in the playground. She's got problems with her limbs and joints and so on, so she can't be allowed to go on all the playground equipment. We have to really monitor her carefully. And there's another boy that might push another child over if he's not watched very carefully. So they're the two that we're really targeting. The other one, we've just had to say to the parents, we can't do that. So we're prioritising what we can do.
I think sometimes it's the systems you put in place as well. That's where you can be the most creative. So we have clubs at lunchtimes at our school as well. So every day there's something you can do. So you can be in the art room, you can be ICT, Japanese, somewhere there's a club, and we tap into that sometimes. So that is, there's no need for one-on-one following around, but we know where they are, we know they're safe, if need be. Now we don't need to do that for Amani, and we don't need to do it for Aya, because they're not going to run off. If anything, Amani's going to sit down and not move, which we love about her. But we have places that we can send them, or I guess we have a disco on Friday. We're talking about music one before, which I almost got wrong, except that they gave the answer away earlier, because she loves music. So we have a disco on Friday, so we know where they're going to be because there's somewhere for them to go. So for us, that's one way of doing it. I agree totally with the resourcing. I won't have an argue with a deep person here, but it's quite positive. But yeah, that's the way we look at those things. We also, I don't know, I'm not sure how you go at your school, Ashley, but sometimes it works out that 2 PSD kids will be in one classroom. Does that ever work? Yeah, that works out.
Sometimes 3.
Sometimes 3. So we can be creative in that way. That might work out. I want to hand this up.
Sorry, you were talking about using more than one aide per student. How does that work? Do you roster them on 1 week on, 1 week off? How do you mix that up?
We don't roster one person to one person. So they'll be covering 2. And when I talked about that independence mat, it'll be, I'll get Ashley going, and then I'll go and check in with Cherie. And then I'll get Cherie going, I'll go and check in with somebody else.
Sorry, I meant the aide. You said you didn't want the student getting used to just having one aide.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So how do you manage that?
Yeah, on our timetable we roster them around so that they spend half the time in that year level, and then a completely different year level. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's on our ES timetable.
Is it on the same day, or they would have a day like?
No, it depends on how it works out. There'll be some days where the morning will be in one room, and then in the afternoon they'll be somewhere else. And we also ask our ES to run small programs. Some run LLI, level literacy intervention. Some run phonics programs, whatever we need. Just a bit of social skills that I saw earlier. So yeah, that's how we do it.
We don't do that, so I can't comment there. But we do tend to have one aide because the way the funding is, I've got about $50,000 or $60,000 coming out of my SRP because the PSD funding doesn't cover, but I need that many aides. So it's not subsidised, it's just the need of the school. That's the way we do it. But we tend to have an aide with usually 2 or 3 children. There are 2 aides is it 2 aides who've got 1? Yeah, 2 aides who've got 1 child full time because they are fairly special need. Okay.
Also, when we're talking to our ES staff about, rotating through different people, we talk about, when Aya leaves next year and she's in grade 6, if you've only worked with Aya your entire life as an ES professional, what are you going to offer the next kid? What are you going to offer the next person who needs support? It's development for the ES staff and teachers as well as it is for helpful for the students.
Can I just add to that too, Paul? I think it's interesting that you mentioned that the parents sometimes are the ones that aren't very keen for that to happen too, and I think that's a really important point, that sometimes the parents are very happy to get to know the aide that well too, whereas here it's actually not a really good outcome for the child or for them long term.
We've had that problem for the last 3 years with one parent in particular who likes to choose the aide and the teacher and which kids are in his class. So it's, it was a pretty anxious time I don't know who's more anxious, the parent or the child, and I think it's the parent actually,
Yeah.
was more anxious, and we had to say you really have to trust our professional opinion, because we had an aide who could not stay with that child again. He was such high need, we needed to give the aide some time out, and we tend to swap over the aides and the children every year in most cases. There are a couple of exceptions where the expertise level is such that that aide needs to continue working with that child, but generally we share the love and move it all around, definitely.
Yeah, I really love that idea of sharing the love and using ES staff in different areas and kids getting used to them. But in our situation, we have an aide working with our student, and she's only allocated 4 hours a day. So as it is, it's really hard, and a lot of that is during break time. So it's really hard keeping up communication between teacher and aide with just the one. Is it difficult? Like, how do you meet the challenges of communicating between staff or between teacher and support staff when the hours are sort of limited and most of their break time is spent in the playground too?
Well, I can't answer that because we never allocate per hour. My view is if a child has special needs and they need an aide, they're going to need that aide every hour that they're at school. So that's why we put 2 or 3 kids together and combine that so that there's someone there whenever they need that assistance, if they do. And like you were saying before, one of the things we do is by the time the kid gets to grade 6, we don't want the aide to be intervening too much at all. We want them to be backing off so that child develops the independence. But I've never subscribed to the idea that you've got level 2 funding, that means these are so many hours that you have. I just don't understand that way of thinking, so we just don't do that.
Yeah, we don't do that either. There's not an allocation of level 4 funding equals this many hours. Not at all. It's what they need. And I use an example. We have a vision impaired student at our school who, up until this year, was funded at level 2, but essentially needed full-time support and extra to make her resources in Braille. We know that the funding doesn't match what her needs are. We know that. So we kind of rob Peter to pay Paul kind of thing. Later on, when she's in grade 6 and she's fluent reading Braille, she will need less support. So we look at a holistic picture and the long-term goal. We have to do it that way. So it's what the need is right now. And yeah, we're stretched, but we always manage.
Hello. This is all really interesting because I've just become an inclusion LT at my secondary school. And what you're talking about, you said you had one parent who's saying, they want this for their kid. I've got probably 27. And we're really sort of, my biggest challenge I can see already is going to be communicating what's changed for them. They're very used to the culture of, and I think it was Graham that used the term velcroing an aid to a student. And them having aid support all the time. Now, we have 4 aides and 27 kids funded. I understand all of the inclusion things, but and what we need to do to become an inclusion school. And in fact, we have great resources. So we have allied health at our school, we have speeches, lots of different programs. But I'm wondering if you have any tips from leadership in how to sort of change the culture with the parents. What are the things that you have done that have seen the parents really come on board from the old culture of just funding and aid to the holistic view of being an inclusive school?
Boy, that's a question and a half. I think secondary schools get the short end of the stick on that one because I've noticed that all of my kids, when they go through to year 6 and they are reassessed, they seem to lose their funding or they go from level 3 to level 1 funding. I still don't know why we seem to have an assessment of a Down syndrome child as though they're suddenly going to be cured of Down syndrome at the end, but that's just me. And I think you probably have fewer resources than we have. I think one of the things you possibly need to do is to sit down with the parents and actually tell them what has happened to the funding, that you simply do not have the resources that you would have once had in primary school, and then give them the phone number of the region or the department to call. And I'm serious, because the more people that make the squeaky noise, that really does work. If we all sit back and just meekly accept that this is what the department does, then nothing's going to get done. I frequently hand out Region's phone number to people who are unhappy with things. Yeah, I agree with you, ring them. Here it is. Because that's the only way that things are going to get done. I really do think it's an education thing with those parents. You need to tell them because you simply don't have the same funds that we have.
Yeah.
I don't think. Would I be right in thinking that?
I think so, yeah.
Because you've got 4 8s and 22 students. I've got...
27, yeah.
How many?
27.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
Well, I've got 19 and 11 8s.
Yeah.
And even then I pinch money from my other budget for that anyway.
So just in your experience on whose door you knock on a department or who you call up at department as the print, who would that be? And can you probably give me their email?
Who do I go to?
Yeah.
Well, it's the PSD coordinator, and
Yeah,
I
right.
have written letters to James
Yeah.
Molino,
Yeah.
and I get a standard response back. So,
All
but I
right.
figure if I don't do it, nothing will happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Thank you.
I think we should almost strike. I think it's quite outrageous. I'm an aide. I work in a school that celebrates diversity. We've got 4 kids on the program. We should have many more funded. And our school's a poor school, and it's coughing up all this money to the Down syndrome. The child with Down syndrome came in at level 2 at prep, and he ran. He's in nappies, blah, 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 and still does all this, along with more antisocial behaviours. Totally lovable. And it's just outrageous that last year we had 8 departmental officials come and look at our practices, and they came in taxis. And it just, I still haven't got over that their taxi bills would be more than my wage. I think we should strike. Really.
Any other questions? No. From this side of the room, any other questions or comments? Well, I think that might be it. Well, I'd like to thank you again, Ashley and Paul. It was fantastic. Thank you all very much.